And language functioning. The left hemisphere of our brain is responsible for language functioning. In most individuals, about 10% of the population is flipped. And it seems to be more common if you're left-handed, that you're, not all the time, but if you're left-handed, it's more prevalent that the right side of your brain will be responsible for language. And not good or bad, just the way it is. Wernicke's area is responsible for comprehension. And Broca's area is responsible for production. These are very common sites for strokes. It's along what's called the middle cerebral artery distribution, and those are very common artery distribution of arteries that are susceptible to strokes. That's why oftentimes after a stroke, especially in the left hemisphere, language is affected. So what are some symptoms of someone who has language impairments? Well, they have difficulty finishing sentences, word finding, comprehension. So what are some interventions we can do as caregivers? Well, one is be patient. All right? The more that you don't want to rush them all the time, and you want to allow time to help finish their responses, and sometimes you need to help facilitate that. But if you're impatient, then that person's going to start to feel bad. You want to keep the stimulus simple. You want to limit choices, limit steps. If it's hard for you to process language and information coming in a verbal manner, then you want to make it as simple as possible. And when you're talking with an individual and you have some sort of strategy or intervention or something you want them to remember, access as many multiple neural pathways as possible. So you not only say it, you show it, you maybe draw pictures, you maybe show pictures of it, and you practice it. So you're accessing different neural aspects of the brain in order to ingrain a behavior or a lesson or something you want them to know about. So this last part of my presentation, I'm going to talk about the shape model of caregiving. Excuse me, I didn't mean to take that ice in my mouth. The shape model of caregiving. This is a model that I designed that I just try to think of some acronym that would work that kind of takes you through what I am thinking about as I'm trying to help a caregiver in their work with a person with dementia, whether it's a professional caregiver or a loved one. So what is it? Well, S stands for safety, all right, and H stands for health. So before I think about anything, I'm thinking about safety issues and health issues. All right, those are the two first things that have to be addressed first. The A stands for assess. So if we're looking at a behavior, then I want to assess what is going on with this behavior, because you want to tailor the intervention specific to what that behavior is trying to communicate. I also want interventions to be practical. This is another thing I'm thinking about. Is this practical? Can it be repeated by not only the loved one, but when that loved one needs a break, can the other person facilitate that intervention as well? And finally, I want interventions to think about the emotional tone. What is emotionally trying to be communicated with the behavior, and what can we then communicate back to them with the intervention? Because emotions can still be understood. Even though the language might not be there to express it, even though the memory may not be there to remember what the emotion was about, the emotion, make no mistake about it, is still real. So what is a shape model of care management? Well, it's a framework of which to provide compassionate care. It encourages care providers to look at challenges through the patient's eyes. I say get in the pool with them. When there's something going on, you want to get in the pool with them and try to see things through their eyes and what they're trying to communicate to you. It works to change the environment and the care provider's responses in addressing challenging behaviors. So safety, first and foremost, right? So first priority in any intervention strategy, it may cause a conflict with the patient. Driving, for example. It may cause a conflict, but there's some times where just conflicts cannot be avoided, and you have to address safety. Taking guns out of the house of a patient with dementia just has to be done. If it causes a conflict, then so be it. Try to protect the responsibility, try to project the responsibility onto professionals. For example, myself, your doctor, the DMV, etc. Try to diffuse it from you, the family, the children, and say, well, that gosh darn doctor said you can't drive. Can you believe it, Dad? You know, project it onto them so they don't get angry at you. Enlist care professionals to support decisions. So, and that's why, people like Janet and other professional type caregivers that have experience in geriatric care and dementia care, can kind of help facilitate a family intervention and help maybe the children look at things from a different perspective as well. Health. Will address health-related issues before employing other life-changing strategies or modifications. So if there are health issues that are going on, those can be in large part responsible for the challenging behaviors to begin with. And recognize that acute or chronic health changes may be the cause of the challenging behaviors. And acute health changes are not normal, meaning acute changes in mental status, rather, are not normal. And I see this all the time. Person may have dementia, yes, but then they wake up one morning and they're confused or disoriented, they're not making any sense. They say, oh, well, he just has dementia. No, things do not happen abruptly. If that is occurring, that means that there's a large part, a medical reason for that needs to be evaluated. Now, what about assess? How do I assess behaviors? Well, this is taken, and Janet's going to go over this more, but just from my perspective, from the developmental literature working with children, you have the ABCs, the antecedent, the behavior, and then the consequence, right? And that's how you develop behavioral interventions and strategies for children. Well, on this, I cross out the C, and we have the antecedent, so what happened right before the event. The behavior, what was the behavior that was displayed? And the consequence we cross out, because punishment does not work. And Janet goes on that more deeply, so I'm not going to get too far into that. But I look at the E, the ABE. What's in the environment that we can change? Can we change our responses? Can we change the environment to try to help shape the behavior of that patient? Care strategies need to be practical. That means they need to be repeatable, simple, creative, flexible. So those issues you need to think about when I work with loved ones and family. This is a real opportunity for them to be creative and think about different interventions. I'm going to give you one quick example of that in just a second. So emotional resonance. Emotions and feelings remain far longer than facts or data. So that's important when you're thinking about an intervention, that positive emotions will last just as long as the negative emotions, and try to facilitate as much positive emotions as possible. And you want to try to attempt to identify the emotional communication behind a behavior. What are they trying, even though it may be unreasonable, it may be lacking any sort of logic, there's an emotion behind that. And if you address the emotion, if you address the emotion, then you can address the challenging behavior. So let me give you one quick case example, and then I'm going to hand it over to Janet. So this was a patient. Safety-wise, fine, no safety issues. But what was going on is that this patient was refusing to change out of her undergarments, her Depends, because she came from Depression era and she didn't want to spend the money, right? So family would have arguments with the patient. She refused to do it. So there was a health issue kind of there, but it was a hygiene issue as well. Well, what was the emotion being communicated? That she wanted to save the money. She grew up during depression. That was something that was ingrained in her. So even though the dementia was present, these long-held values and beliefs still were pervasive in her behavior. So I told the daughter, I said, purchase a box of Depends and put a big sign on it that says, congratulations, you've won a year's supply of Depends. And walk in with mom and say, Mom, look at this. I sent a letter and lo and behold, look what happened. And the mom was so ecstatic because she was going to be saving so much money over the course of the year. So we had to be creative. We had to be flexible. It's something that could be repeated. Did we make a little therapeutic white lie? Well, yeah. But this patient was going to be much happier, much better off, and the family is going to be much better off because they didn't have to keep doing this.